Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, I am your lean, mean, movie-talking machine, your Screen Queen, Samantha Parrish. So let's talk about Philadelphia. It's a well-known city, and it's also a well-known movie about AIDS starring Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. Now I have to say, this was the first real movie I ever watched. I was 16 years old when I watched Philadelphia, and no 16-year-old just willingly wants to watch a movie about dying Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington trying to overcome homophobia. It's a heavy hitter movie, but it hits all the right places. I watched it 3 times in one day, and it was the first time I'd ever really been able to grasp things that wasn't taught to me in the classroom. I had heard AIDS thrown around here and there, but I never really knew what it was besides it being a sexually transmitted disease, or so I thought. When we look at the end of the 80s and into the 90s, when the AIDS epidemic was being talked about, a lot of false stigma was going around that gay people were the cause of AIDS. I mean, Eddie Murphy even joked about it in his Delirious special where he said, oh, you're going to kiss him on the lips and go home with that AIDS. And even Eddie Murphy went on to go say that he regrets the jokes he made about homosexuals, including the jokes about AIDS, until things were known now. But it wasn't for something like Philadelphia to really bring everything to a halt. Philadelphia stopped the stigma completely. To the core of the movie, it is an AIDS representation, but it's more than just an AIDS movie. There's a lot that I'll be discussing with how this film came to be, what was the inspiration behind it, and many other stuff involved with this film. So I hope you get your tissue box ready because this is Philadelphia. To start off this episode, I want to talk about where Philadelphia came from. This film was pushed to be made because of Jonathan Demme having a friend dying of AIDS. There is a real life story to Philadelphia that I'm going to tell you about that I saw on IMDb. I'm going to read this to you word for word. Based in part on the AIDS discrimination lawsuit by Jeffrey Bowers, a young lawyer working for a prominent multinational law firm, on December 4th, 1986, he was fired by a vote of the directors and departed the firm the following day. The directors originally decided to fire him in July of that year, sidestepping company policy by not interviewing his supervisors, asking for a list of his clients, or ascertaining his billable hours. His supervisors protested, which delayed his firing, but the partners voted again that October, 12 votes to 3. The initial vote in July to fire him took place 2 months after Bowers received good marks on a routine performance evaluation. The vote of dismissal took place 1 month after the positive evaluation and 1 month before firing Bowers. As with Hanks's Andrew Beckett character, Bowers also suffered from visible lesions caused by Kaposi's sarcoma. The case took 6 years in all. So, 1986, 6, 7, 8, 9, 90, 91. Shit, so that's how, that took place for, the following years for Philadelphia to be made, that 2-year leeway, 1.5 year leeway. Wow. Looking at the math behind it, damn. Jonathan Demme, who is the director of the film, as well as being the director for Something Wild, and famously for The Silence of the Lambs, had a friend who was dying of AIDS. And he changed everything. He needed to talk about what his friend was going through and the mistreatment his friend had endured with the diagnosis of AIDS. Jonathan Demme even went so far as to cast his dying friend in the film. When I knew that changed the way I saw Philadelphia, for how this was more than just being a movie to tell a story. It was a movie to tell a person's story and have that person in the story. He may not have been like the front focus, and like his life story is not really paralleled with Tom Hanks, but his story still matters. And it led to people that have a similar situation to someone like Tom Hanks's character. Knowing that, it changes the way that I watch the movie. You know, I can definitely see Jonathan Demme's thought process of how he wanted to go about this, but damn, thinking about it though, Jonathan Demme was taking a major risk. I had mentioned that this man was already making some great movies with Something Wild and Silence of the Lambs, and then boom, a movie about AIDS, the thing that no one wanted to talk about or wanted to admit that they were wrong about. In a way, as much as I've said that the story is pushed by Jonathan Demme's friend having AIDS, and then the story, you know, also being the base for continuing on from Bauer's story by having a part of that being placed for Andrew Beckett. There are a lot of people out there that didn't get their story heard, and Philadelphia was that story that got everyone's story heard about their experience with AIDS, or how they died of AIDS, or the ones that watched their loved ones die of AIDS and trying to break the stigma. With the time that we had with Jonathan Demme as a director before his passing in 2017, he knew how to tackle heavy-hitting things, even with something like Silence of the Lambs that dealt with homophobia and transphobia, and then here he is with another film that's also about homophobia. And, you know, it kind of strangely does go hand in hand, but it's a different ballgame because it's not just something where it's associated with the character, it's a commentary on the whole situation, and that whole commentary is the film. We're talking 2.5 hours of addressing something to an audience that didn't know what was going on, and that could either be boring or controversial. It's a different kind of situation when you want to digest something that is intelligent, but wondering, are people really going to listen? Are they going to stop being ignorant to something that they do need to know? Jonathan Demme has the experience of understanding what AIDS is and wanted to share what had happened, what has happening to his friend, and in turn, like, the way that things are happening with Andy. With the way he created the character of Andy, it really did put AIDS in a spotlight that is sympathetic. Like, this is a man that's dying and he's about to lose everything. He didn't ask for AIDS. But with the way that this film tackled AIDS, it also left room to tackle the issues around homophobia. The whole plot around Philadelphia is Andrew Beckett dying of AIDS and being wrongfully terminated at the law firm he worked for, and has no choice but to hire another lawyer who he knows is going to get the job done for him, but that lawyer he hired is a homophobic person. So it kind of creates like a conflict, like it's a gay man that has to hire a homophobic lawyer to help him get through because he knows the guy will get the job done. But therein lies the conflict. And it does talk about what homophobia is like. There are some like kind of harsh criticisms that Joe Miller does give against gay people, and the way that he does it, it is accurate to the statement, to the way that people did talk about gays and the whole stigma around it. And that is something that Joe Miller would do. He kind of does represent that part of people that do talk about gays badly. And that does show how much he has to learn about something that he never wanted to learn, but then finding out, wow, I was wrong about gay people. You look forward to him finding out he was wrong the entire time. And for that being a film in 1993, with two very popular actors, like, that was a hell of a risk. Again, like, Jonathan Demme put his life on the line for this, put his whole career on the line, and had so many people that are in a prosperous part of Hollywood that could hurt them too. But with the way that they brought this film to life, like, you kind of forget about the controversy of what's going on, and you truly see what lies beyond the surface of what people chose to ignore. And this film gave that to a lot of people that didn't know what was going on, and told them what life was like with AIDS. And this film broke the stigma against AIDS as well as gay people. It, like I said, it's a heavy hitter that's also a double hitter. It was doing a lot of tasks. So this film was like the jack of all trades. So I want to go ahead and segue to talk about the cast of Philadelphia. Even though this film is led by Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, who are the best in the film, but there are so many famous faces in this film, and people who would eventually find fame later on after Philadelphia. It's one of those films you can look back and just see the startup of someone's career, or the continuing success of someone's career. And Philadelphia got to be a part of their resume, which is pretty cool. So, right off the bat, Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. This film would not work without them, but it's strange to see what it would have been like if it didn't turn out like that. Originally, the role of Joe Miller was going to go to a comedic actor, feeling that could really bring the thunder, kind of help alleviate a lot of the hard-hitting information to kind of give like a palate cleanser. And I can see that. There are several movies where we've had a dramatic tone of the film that has a side of comedy to it to be able to give you a little bit of a break from all of the heavy stuff throughout the film. But at the same time, Philadelphia has a serious tone, and it has to be a serious tone. There can't be someone funny in there that would take away from the nature of the film. Like, if Joe Miller was played by someone like, I don't know, Robin Williams. Not shading on Robin Williams, but that would have distracted from the film. And you'd be waiting for the comedic stuff from this actor. You wouldn't be waiting for something dramatic from that actor. Sometimes, yes, you do get a surprise. And you do get a dramatic performance from someone who can make you pee your pants, but that's not the case here. We got to go with Denzel. And so it says here, let me find it. It says right here in the trivia, originally Jonathan Demme was going to cast a comedic actor in the role of Joe Miller, as he felt it would be a good counterbalance for Tom Hanks, who had already been cast to give an audience the quote-unquote it's okay to watch a film about a gay man dying of AIDS. Demme had considered casting Bill Murray or, Robin Williams, just like I mentioned, but when Denzel Washington showed interest in the part, he gave the role to him instead, because Demme had wanted to work with Washington for the past few years. That is a decision well made. I can't see this film without Denzel Washington. The way that he works with Tom Hanks is absolutely perfect. They do have a wonderful counterbalance with the fact that it's a man dying of AIDS and being gay, and another man being homophobic. And within the first few scenes, you see Denzel Washington. He has that representation of people who don't know how to feel about gay people. Like in the beginning scene where he puts his hand out to shake Andy's hand, and he's like, "How are you, Andy?" And Andy goes, "I have AIDS." And then the way he reacts to it, he like backs up and he kind of shakes a little bit. He's like, "Oh, gotta give some space," because that was what people did when they found out someone had AIDS. They just immediately backed away, like, "Oh, I'm gonna catch it now. It's gonna get airborne. I'm gonna get sick." It created such this paranoia stigma that went on, and the way he reacted wasn't really too forthright, but it wasn't too like nonchalant. It was just the right reaction to something that was accurate to its time period before things changed, before you got to know someone and saw them past their illness. There is another actor in here named Daniel Chapman, who is seen at the beginning of the film, and he also died of AIDS. And his role in the film, I cannot confirm if he is the friend of Jonathan Demme. I scoured and looked everywhere, and I unfortunately couldn't find anything about it. I do know that Jonathan Demme did go out of his way to hire people that are dying of AIDS to help echo their story, and the studio did intervene time and time again, like, "We quit hiring people with AIDS. We can't have that." And Jonathan Demme is like, "Why would you ask me to not hire people that have AIDS? That's so hypocritical. That's not happening. I'm gonna hire them." And Daniel Chapman got to be one of them, which is pretty cool that he gets to have a final role to give the rest of his life to talk about an issue that will be talked about from years to come. It's pretty interesting to see that. You can find his character at the beginning of the movie where he's in the room where Tom Hanks is getting his blood transfusions. And let me see, who are the other Kit Kats in here? So, another woman in this film is Anna Devereaux Smith, who you may not know, but you've actually seen her and may have not known it. She was in The American President with Michael Douglas. She was also in the TV series Nurse Jackie. And last I knew, she also made an appearance on Legends of Tomorrow, which is pretty cool. She's got an extensive filmography. She is great. She's a great part of the film. And it's wonderful to get to see like her early works before she would really go on to gain more acclaim. And here we go. There's another one. Well, we got to talk about this guy, Jason Robards, who has such a lengthy filmography that there's not enough time to go with it. But I can throw a couple of names your way between him being in Parenthood, and he was also in Crimson Tide. And gosh, that's about as much as I can kind of tell you about like the end of the 80s into the 90s. But he's also reunited with his Parenthood co-star, Mary Steenburgen, who's also in the film as one of the lawyers on the opposing team. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about something she did for her character that was totally unscripted. There's a part of the film that her character has to do where she presents a mirror to Andrew Beckett to make him look at the lesions on his face and seeing the look of horror on his face. She has to do her job and she hates it, and she sits back down at her desk after she's asked him to do the mirror stuff, and she goes, "I hate this." And that part was entirely improvised on accident. After shooting the mirror scene, Jonathan Demme had encouraged her to incorporate into the role so the woman would be more human, that she's not after winning the case, that she truly does not like what she has to do. She has a heart and soul. She's not just doing this to get back at people. There are some heartless lawyers in the world that are like, I don't care about your feelings. I want the paycheck. But not her. She's like, I have to go belittle a man that has AIDS. I don't like this. And that is really, really well to see that incorporate their character, and it does change the way you do see this film. It is an AIDS awareness movie, but it is a courtroom movie, and it does have to represent what that's like. All the lawyers don't feel like lawyers that you've seen in other films. They're doing their job, but they also know what's going on, and they don't like what they have to do. When I look at that film now, there aren't really any antagonists involved. They're just people that don't really know what to do, and they're people that are trying to understand stuff. And Mary Steenburgen's character is one of those people that really does bring a lot of the humane nature into a film that's trying to bring more awareness to AIDS. And further down the line, we are almost done with the rest of the cast to talk about. Let's see here. So the last one that I want to talk about, the last one I feel has to be talked about, is Antonio Banderas. This threw me for such a loop when I saw Antonio Banderas literally run onto the screen. That's how we're introduced to him. He's running to the hospital to go meet Andrew. And to know, like, he and Tom Hanks are playing a gay couple, like, I wouldn't have seen it coming. I wouldn't have seen Woody and Puss in Boots being a couple. That did not cross my mind at all. And then now it's like, damn, they do play a really good gay couple. As much as Antonio Banderas is known for like his suave, sophisticated, almost antagonistic characters, him playing Miguel does not get talked about for playing the partner of Tom Hanks, who has to deal with all of the aftermath of what's going to happen when he goes, or if it works. Like, there's so many questions and pleas that you get from Miguel's character that really does echo to people who are affected when their loved one gets diagnosed with AIDS. And it sounds weird to say, but his role is not talked about for being important. It is as important as Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington. I'm still surprised that he didn't get, like, the top billing, but then again, Antonio Banderas was an up-and-comer, and from what I know, this was his first English-speaking role. That's a hell of a way to go in, like, to go into doing more English-speaking roles, and this being one of them, and to be a part of that, that's pretty cool. But before the role of Miguel went to Antonio Banderas, there was another person who was also in talks to play Miguel. John Leguizamo was also approached to play Miguel and turned the role down to be in Super Mario Brothers. Oh, like, it kind of hurts my mouth to say that. Oh, damn. Just, wow. I mean, it's kind of a weird double-edged sword where this could have been a really great performance for John Leguizamo, because he does do great in dramatic performances. I mentioned him in To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. You know, ironically, also a gay topic movie that he would go on to in 2 years. But, still, damn it, that's kind of a downgrade. I know that hurt his career a lot, and Philadelphia probably would have been a good career resurgence for him, but at that point, John Leguizamo had already been around after he made the transition in the 80s to English-speaking roles, and like I mentioned, this was the first English-speaking role for Antonio Banderas, and I'm glad that the role went to Antonio Banderas. He needed that jump into other forms of media outside of what he usually did for Spanish-speaking roles. So it's a weird way to think about it. Like, I'm glad it didn't work out for John Leguizamo, but at least something worked out for him in the future. And I'm glad that this film did work out for Antonio Banderas. But I do find it a little bit ironic, though, that these two actors did go on to play into the DreamWorks movies, you know, Ice Age and Shrek. So it's a little bit of a funny little bizarre parallel right there, but I just figured I'd mention that. So there is one more actor that I need to mention before we move on, and I can't believe I almost forgot the most obvious one of them all, and I feel like it'd be a crime if I didn't mention it. Charles Napier appears in the film as the judge in the entire trial. Now, if you don't know who Charles Napier is, don't feel bad. He was mostly known for playing the bad guys, but no one really knew the name behind the guy who played the bad guys. But he is mostly famous for playing the unlucky guard that got attacked by Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. And when I saw Philadelphia, I'm just like, I know that guy from somewhere. I absolutely know. Well, I knew him as Murdoch from Rambo First Blood Part 2. But seeing him in Silence of the Lambs, like, that was my main thing that got me to recognize him more. And I'm glad that he did get to continue to work with Jonathan Demme for another film. I don't know how many more films they did together, but that's a nice nod. Like, Jonathan Demme has a way of, like, continuing to work with familiar actors, or like I mentioned with Denzel, finally get around to work with actors he's always wanted to work with. Like, he knows the power he's got in his arsenal, but he's not gonna just whisk away the talents he knows need to be shared. And I'm glad that he got to show a little bit more of Charles Napier's talents. So there's a scene that I want to talk about with Philadelphia that I feel is not just the greatest scene in Philadelphia, but one of the greatest scenes of all time. And that's a heavy thing coming from me, where I try to keep everything balanced. I don't love one scene above another in its significance towards me. But this specific part of Philadelphia I'm going to tell you about, like, once you know about it, or once you see it, like, it lives with you. And it's one of the reasons why I have said that this is one of my favorite Tom Hanks movie, and one of my favorite performances, and one of the most powerful performances he's done. So, after the Halloween party that Joe attends with Andrew and Miguel, and Joe even brings his wife, it's time to get back to business to talk more about the deposition and what's going to happen for the next part of the trial. And so, they're talking about everything, and Andrew talks about what will happen afterwards. And Joe, at that point, is starting to, like, look past the homophobia. Joe is starting to see the forest beyond the trees, to see who Andrew is as a person. Like, taking away the AIDS thing and taking away the fact that Andrew's gay, like, he's just treating him like a friend. And that's starting to muddle the relationship, the working relationship, where he has to dismiss everything to go back to work. He's like, let's get back to work, because he doesn't want to have to face the day that Andrew does die. And Andrew asks some questions about if Joe knows the opera or knows about Madame Butterfly, and Joe's just trying to get back to work. He does give some answers like, oh yeah, my wife listens to that, and then Andrew gets up and he presses play, and at that point Joe knows he's lost. There is no more work to be done. As the song begins, Andrew is translating what the foreign opera singer is singing about, and every frame that she sings, he pauses and explains what this frame is about, to digest what the singer is saying and feel the weight of the message in the song. And it's going back and forth between Andrew and Joe, and I love the fact that this scene is altered by a red light. Now, normally, it's kind of like a shot in the dark to have a color change onto the screen. Of course, it plays with like the color spectrum and color psychology, but having the color red just signifies like more of the power behind it, and it's such a bold choice to have there. I'm not really too big on like color psychology or whatever, and it just kind of goes one ear at the other for me, but that was a good move. That was a very good move to put something that feels like the same realm that you see with a movie like The Fisher King, where they have those fantasy sequences to really show the power of the situation, or to kind of be swept away by the moment. And that's what this is. You're being swept away by the moment. You feel it, and you feel it with Joe. And you feel it with Andy. And the way that Denzel Washington just reacts to it all, to just take in everything going on, and you see the wheel turning in Joe's mind about how he was wrong about Andrew, and he's really enjoying the moment to learn about something he never really wanted to learn about, and knows, damn, what this guy is gone, that's it. And right as like the crescendo of the opera is done and Tom Hanks puts his hand down, Joe slumps in his chair, and I shit you not, I forgot how to breathe when I watched this scene. Anytime I watch that scene, the air leaves my lungs. I am breathless, and there's rarely been a time that I have been breathless during a scene to feel the weight of the emotion and the music and everything around it. It is a perfect scene and severely underrated. If you're ever able to find this movie, I know it's available on Tubi as of right now, and I think there might be some scenes on YouTube, but if you look up the Madame Butterfly scene from Philadelphia, you're going to have to get an asthma inhaler, because you are going to lose the air in your lungs. Just right when, like, Denzel slumps back in his seat, that's when I slump back in my seat. Like, oh, I just temporarily forgot where I was for a moment because I was so immersed into that scene. That's how powerful it is. And it exists within a movie talking about AIDS. With the performances that I mentioned and the scenes that I mentioned, there is one other factor that makes this film work, and that's the music. I never thought in a million years that Bruce Springsteen would do the music for this movie, and I had known who Bruce Springsteen was and the talents of his songs. His songs forever live on in my family. It's the reason that the stereo just increases in my grandfather's car. And sometimes it can be a bit of a risk to have a very famous singer do a song for a film in the fear that it's going to overshadow the film, or it might not be that great. There are other people that come as contenders and go, okay, who do we want for this movie? And, you know, it kind of fits. It fits with the fact that Bruce Springsteen has always done music for the people working the 9-to-5 shifts, the people on the streets, the people living day to day. He became a big giant voice for blue-collar America, just like John Mellencamp. And when he did the song Streets of Philadelphia, it really does hit on the emotional note that matches the film. If you ever get the chance to listen to Streets of Philadelphia, it really does fit. It really does. And I'm glad that they put this song with his, like, album compilations, and it's not separate into, like, a different section, because sometimes it's a little bit weird with musicians that do music for films, that sometimes it doesn't get to be a part of what that singer did. And it still is an important song as the other songs that Bruce Springsteen has made, like Glory Days and Born in the USA or Born to Run. But this still has an emotional weight to it that feels different, but still feels like the same vibe that Bruce Springsteen has always given us. It's a great song for a great movie, and you gotta check it out. There is another reference that does further the echo that AIDS does have in this film to talk about those that lost their lives. Of course, I mentioned Jonathan Demme's friend. Then there was the story behind Philadelphia. There is a reference made within Philadelphia to make a nod to someone. So there's a part in the movie, it says right here in IMDb, when Andy Beckett leaves Joe Miller's office for the first time, he stands on the street in front of the window with the partially visible words McCready and Schultz written on it. This is a reference to journalist Randy Schultz, who wrote the acclaimed AIDS history, quote, "And the band lived on," end quote, and who himself died of AIDS the year after the film came out. And the same thing goes for the other actor that I mentioned that is seen in the opening scene with the blood transfusion, Daniel Chapman. He also died the very next year of age. The weight of tragedy is really felt in this film even before Andy Beckett dies. But between the character of Andrew Beckett and the actor Daniel Chapman that died the next year. And the reference in the film, there is another man. The man I'm going to tell you about was originally for the character Andrew Beckett before Tom Hanks got the role. It's hard to believe, like, who would play Andy Beckett besides Tom Hanks, but originally Jonathan Demme did want a man diagnosed with AIDS to play a man diagnosed with AIDS. The actor that was originally chosen for Andy was Ron Vawter. Ron Vawter was the friend of Jonathan Demme and had even been in a lot of his films. So Jonathan Demme had wanted him for the role, but TriStar said no. They're like, nah, we don't want someone with AIDS to play someone with AIDS. Like, makes you wonder if they had to say it out loud, like seeing the hypercritical sense to that sentence. And Jonathan Demme found it extremely hypercritical. I mean, who wouldn't find that hypercritical? It makes you wonder, like, are you listening to yourself? You don't want a man having AIDS to play a man having AIDS. Like, it's weird. It's like saying water's not wet, and it's like, that makes no sense. And so, Jonathan Demme did find a way around it. And he cast Ron Vawter in the film as the character Bob Seidman. So he couldn't really get him exactly the way he wanted him for the movie as Andrew Beckett, and honestly, that's a good call, knowing what AIDS does to the body. Like, that would be a lot of strain on this man, like a lot of strain. And Ron Vawter, just to kind of let you know who he is, he's had a very, very, very good career. He has been in Jonathan Demme's movies. He was in The Silence of the Lambs as Paul Krendler. He was also in Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Where is it? There's something else. Oh, well, he was in The Equalizer, and he was in Miami Vice. He's been in a lot of stuff. It's very sad that that man was taken from us. It would have been interesting to see what it would have been like. I'm sure it would have been the same emotional powerhouse as Tom Hanks, and probably even more powerful considering the parallel behind the characters. But wow. There's a lot of, like, tragedy around the film, but at least there's, like, some happy endings in a way to a very tragic film, that everyone's voice got heard, and Jonathan Demme found a way around certain stuff to still get what he wanted, to show the world that everyone was wrong about AIDS, to really break the stigmas, get something going differently. If it wasn't for this film, that we wouldn't have the knowledge that we know now to just permanently break the barrier around the stigmas and there's more sympathy and more awareness brought to AIDS if it wasn't for the film. But there's also one more thing this film did that I'm going to end this episode on, is that this film inspired the movie In and Out. Now, just for the record, I haven't seen In and Out. I know that's a crime somewhere that I've committed that I haven't seen it. I have friends that are not even, like, a part of, like, LGBTQI allies, but they will live and die by that movie for how funny it is. Anyway, the screenwriter behind In and Out had credited Philadelphia being the inspiration to make In and Out. When Tom Hanks was doing his award acceptance speech for Philadelphia, and the way that he had thanked his teacher, that also led to the idea behind In and Out, because that movie is about an actor making an acceptance speech, and he professes his love for his teacher, therefore, like, outing himself and putting the teacher in a weird predicament where he's like, what just happened? At some point I'll watch it and I'll review it for the Screen Queen, but wow, like, it's such a weird transition, because Philadelphia is such a tearjerker movie that does not fail to make people cry or, like, feel differently about gay people. And then there's In and Out, where it has, like, still a dramatic twist to it, but it has so many comedic ties to it from what I've seen in the scenes. Like, wow, it's like a strange palate cleanser from Philadelphia to get something a little bit more uplifting. And still, I'm glad that we had Philadelphia first before we had something like In and Out, so that way people were more, like, acclaimed and prepared and more accepting of something like In and Out. I love the fact that Philadelphia exists. I'm glad this was one of the films that got to serve as a teacher for me, to make me understand something that I didn't understand before, and gave me what I needed to know, just like what everyone else needed to know in the 90s, the new millennium, and then years from then on. It still hits for people 30 years in this movie is still moving people. Jonathan Demme had left us back in 2017 when he passed away, and this is one of those films along the lines of Silence of the Lambs or Something Wild that has still been able to make a strong impact that he did for us. His name doesn't come up enough for the fact that he's the one that directed Philadelphia, and that's good. He cared more about the story, not the fame. Well, that is about all I got to say about Philadelphia. That was not meant to be a Forrest Gump reference, but damn it, I can't believe I made something without even knowing it. Wow. I hope with every fiber of my being that I was able to commentate on this issue with a lot of respect and importance for the way that I learned about it. And thank you for bearing with me as I tried to find ways around to talk about some of the things in this film. It was a heavy film, heavy good, but a good one though. It has a little special place in my collection that never fails to make me smile, make me cry. But wow, that was Philadelphia. So now is the time to find out what the next episode is going to be on The Screen Queen. If you're new here, welcome, glad you're here. I have a system where I never know what the next episode is going to be. So I have a whole bunch of random suggestions in a box, and I just swish it around, pull it through, and see what our episode's going to be. And we both find out together. Isn't it a wonderful experience for us? I think it is. So here we go. Alrighty, I'm going to mix it up really good. Don't know what I'm getting into. That's the beautiful part. Oh, I got one. What are you? Motherfucker. Okay. Oh. Well, this will be an interesting episode. So, the next episode on The Screen Queen is going to be Fatal Attraction. Wow, that's going to be a good historical movie for ways that you don't even know until the next episode comes up. Alrighty. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Screen Queen. If you'd like to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at The Queen of the Screen. And if you would like to see what funny movie-related stuff I put up on TikTok, you can find me at The Mystical Space Witch. And if you would like to follow my book series I make called Inglorious Ink, you can find that in the description box. Alright, you all take care and love one another. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!